What's going on, everybody? We have the meta snapshot for patch 13.8. We did the rundown on Wednesday. I'm gonna make the early game augment guide for this on Saturday, tomorrow. So let's just hop right into the patch. So in the S tier, we have Star Guardian Kai'Sa. Star Guardian emblems and all that fun stuff is just really powerful right now. By far, like the mixture of both able to be run often and very powerful, so that's why it's the best comp right now. Mech Sureshots or Mech Threats. Mech made a move back into the meta because everything else got nerfed. Anima Squad Misfortune, they're back on the menu too because they got a couple buffs. Infiniteam still solid, not as good, but definitely still up there. And then Yasuo Reroll. They changed the way Yasuo targets units, so he is very powerful now with his Winds of the Wanderer augment. In the A tier, we have Spellslingers, Threats, Mascot, Vex. They did a jump up. Lasercorps still solid. Duelists, I feel like Duelists might be a little underrated right now. Maybe they pop up a little further in the future. Jax, built different. Ashe Reroll, Gnar Reroll, Jhin, Jinx Reroll. Jinx got a bit of a buff too. And also for Gnar, he did get the hacker hit, but he's still okay. I wouldn't say he's like S tier like he was before, or like S++, but he's still solid in the A tier. B tier, we have Hearts, Lucian Reroll, and Draven. Probably don't play Draven that much. And then the Leblanc Hacker build, it got killed, so it's in the C tier right now. But let's get into how to play every single one of these comps. So starting with Kai'Sa in the S tier. So with Star Guardian emblem, this comp is S+. Without it, it's S-. So if you don't have the Star Guardian emblem, just reroll for Kai'Sa 3. If you do, play for Misfortune, because Misfortune is going to be an absolute powerhouse with the Star Guardian emblem, plus 2 any good items. So that could be Spear of Shojin or just AP, Jeweled Gauntlet, Archangels, things like that. And then for your main tanks, if you're running MF carry and you didn't reroll, do Echo as your main tank, Garen as your secondary. If you did reroll for Kai'Sa, do Rel as your main tank. For items, you really just want the static shiv on Kai'Sa. That's the only thing that I would say is required in this build. But apart from that, just running like 6 or 8 Star Guardian, 2+ quick draw, that's really all you need to get this going. So the way to play this comp is to, if you want to do the Kai'Sa reroll version, you all can just stabilize at 3-2 and then slow roll at level 7 to go for 3-star units. But if you play like the regular version or playing standard around Misfortune, and that's with all the Star Guardian emblem from either Atoma traits, the Star Guardian crest, crown, whatever you want to call it, you can go just play standard leveling, use Echo as your main tank, Misfortune as your main damage dealer, just like how you play around any other 4-cost comp. And then we have the item recommendations down here. And if you want to like go into this in more detail, head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta, and we got all that for you here. A bunch of augment recommendations, and then we have some hero augments as well. But moving on into the next tier, we have Mech Sureshots. So Mech, I want to spend a little bit more time into because Mech is probably one of the most popular comps of this patch. Or at least it's going to be, because it is very strong right now, and a lot of people are playing attack damage comps. Apart from Star Guardian, most of the good comps right now are attack damage, so having defenders is pretty solid. You could run 4 or 2 defender, both work, but this comp is really flexible. You really just need the Mech, which is Wukong, Garen, and Jax, 1 damage dealer, most cases it's going to be Samira, and then all the other 3 slots, 4 slots, you're going to be able to flex those. So there are a lot of variations of this build. You can go for a threat carry, so you could run the Mech with Garen with good tank items. Focus on the tank items, by the way, not the damage items. And then run like Bel'Veth, Aurelion Soul carry. Or you could play like the Samira version you see here. You could also have the 4 Ace version. Lots of different things you could do. Definitely mix and match based on what you hit. This definitely should be like a pretty flexible comp apart from your tank. So your tank is pretty static. It's just always going to be the Mech. But then after that, just whoever your damage dealer is, it does not really matter. You just need someone who can actually deal damage. Most cases, that's going to be Samira, so you want Last Whisper, and then like 2 damage items or 1 healing item if you don't have it from your augments. And then other stuff that's really good is stuff like high-end shopping, because you want to buy all the expensive units. You could play a lot of legendaries in this comp because there's so many flex spots. If you're playing for AD damage, Cybernetic Implants is going to be really good. And then just like anything for healing, Second Wind's incredible on Mech. That's really going to get you going in this patch. So scrolling down a little bit, you pretty much play it like the Mech of last set. That's really all there is to it. I do recommend playing for like a fast 8, so econ augments in the early game that get you there are really powerful whenever you play this. Another thing that's really good is doing something like a lose streak if you're not able to get one of those econ augments, but really, again, just focus on the tank items. Garen uses like Dragonclaw, Bramble Vest, Redemption, Sunfire Cape, and then Ornn and Radiant tank items are also incredibly good on him. Essentially what the mech does is that it puts 3 units into 1 unit, right? So any multiplier, which an item is a multiplier, is going to multiply even harder on the mech compared to any other tank unit in the game. So that's why Ornn and Radiant items are really, really powerful in this. For Samira, you just want the Last Whisper and then just anything else. Ezreal, you just put anything on him. Bel'Veth, you just copy your Samira items. I do prefer Samira, but sometimes you just get Bel'Veth too for free. And then in those cases, you just go for Bel'Veth instead, put your Samira items on him, maybe add an Edge of Night, Titan's Resolve, or a healing item, and then just go level up and play other stuff later. Aurelion Soul, like Shojin, Jeweled Gauntlet, had Archangels, Giant Slayer, and Guardbreaker, and then I guess for your other tank units, like Riven or something, or your Shen, just put utility or like any other leftover tank items on them. That's really all you have to do. But again, this comp really likes fast aiding because you play around a lot of 4-cost units like Garen, Samira, Aesol, and Bel'Veth. Those are all 4 costs that you need to play, or at least want to play. So anything that can get you to a fast 8 is really going to be powerful. But let's move on into the next comp, which is Misfortune Anima Squad. So this comp got a big buff because Nasus got a buff, Jinx got a buff, Jinx Augment got a buff, so the comp got a lot more powerful, especially in the early game. And the early game is so important for Anima Squad because you want stacks on your Anima Squad trait. And to do that, you need to get kills. So buffing all those early game units has huge implications on this comp. Personally, I didn't think it was enough to put this comp into like the forefront of the meta, but I was proven wrong. It actually is pretty solid. I will say though that the lower rank you are, the stronger Anima Squad is. So if you are in Master Plus, Anima Squad might not be in the S tier. It might be like high A tier, but if you're anything below that, it's going to be in the S tier. So just keep that in mind because some comps work better in higher ratings, some comps work better in lower ratings. This is one prime example of that. The only other version of this comp that I want to cover today is if you get the Spread Shot augment for Vayne. That is Vayne's carry augment, and you only want to take that if you have a lot of sword items. So if you built a Spear of Shojin early and you have like a leftover sword, you could switch into that build, and then you just want to itemize for your Vayne and then slow roll for her for level 8. Apart from that, if you're playing the regular version, as we saw in the picture there, you just want to play standard build. You could stabilize at level 7 or go into level 8 if you have the HP for it, because you do play a lot of 4-cost units, but this comp really does like rolling on level 7 because Riven 2-star and Vayne 2-star, Jinx 2-star really stabilize your board. So never feel like you're forced to fast 8. You can just play standard, and that works out really well for this. We have other item recommendations down here, full augments over here or in the image above. But essentially, this comp just needed a few buffs to really get it into the game, and it definitely got that. You can also go for the Jinx Reroll build, which we'll get into later, so definitely stick around if you have not already. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe below if you have not already. I know a lot of people watch these videos, but they're not actually subscribed to the channel. I'm really only saying this because we're so close to 100K, and I really would like to hit that before the end of the year, hopefully, so definitely appreciate everyone who watches, but it would be even cooler if we hit the subscribe as well. But let's move on into Infiniteam. So Infiniteam definitely got a lot of nerfs. Early game, it's a lot weaker. It was like S tier before, or like maybe even S plus before. However, now it's definitely taken the back seat. I'd say this is like very low in the S tier, borderline A tier. If you start the game off with like a lot of Pantheons, a lot of Lucians, like maybe you have good Sivir items that she could hold on to early, then that's kind of the only time I would go for this. This is kind of like in the spot that Anima Squad was in last patch, but a little bit better than that. So that's kind of where you have to look at Infiniteam right now, at least in my opinion. And it also plays around Samira, which is being stolen by all the mech players. That's another reason why this comp, I feel like it's a little weaker right now. So it might be even lower than S tier. Maybe I drop it down to the A tier next week. But we'll have to see for that. But yeah, you generally want to do an Infiniteam start with Pantheon, Lucian, plus like either Shen or Sivir, depending on what you hit, or if you get the augment for it. Then hopefully if you do have the augment, you could go to 5 Infiniteam really easily, and then that kind of stabilizes you in the mid game. And then after that, you play the Samira lottery at level 7 or level 8, and then hopefully you get Ezreal off Carousel, and then that's really how this comp wants to play out. Now, I did mention that the Infiniteam emblem really unleashes the power of this comp. I will say that the only thing that's required is the Last Whisper on Samira. So we have that marked down here. However, I will say that there is one like last saving grace if you get like completely garbage items. And that is you could play Twisted Fate as a carry if you get no attack damage items. Like, it's not your first choice, but sometimes it is what it is, and you just have to go for it. Now for the augments, cybernetic augments, some people have been asking me how cybernetic works on the Infiniteam units, so I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here. So we all know that Infiniteam units, when they get cloned, they get an item. However, some people notice that they don't always get the cybernetic buff on those units. And the reason why is because you need an item on the original unit in order to get the buff on the cloned unit. So as long as you have an item on your original unit, your clone should work with the cybernetic buff. However, if they don't have any items, then it won't work. So that's like my little tip of the day for Infiniteam. If you guys use a cybernetic augment thinking it's gonna work for everyone else. So smack the like button if you did not know that. And I guess just comment if you did know already. But on to the next one, we have Yasuo Reroll. This is the new comp that we have for this week because Yasuo's AI got changed. And it's very simple to play. So you just want to reroll for 2-cost units, and look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4 2-cost units you could reroll for. So that's a lot of 3-stars that are going to be hidden for your team. So that's why you want to run supers. Pretty much for most 2-cost rerolls, supers are going to be incredible. But only play this with the Winds of the Wandering augment. Yasuo items are very important too, and ideally you get a duelist opener as well. At least 2 duelists, preferably 4 duelists, but hey, if you just get 2 duelists, that's fine as well. Golden Ticket's going to be really good. Battle Mage is going to be really good because he's an AP frontliner. Featherweight's going to be very powerful because he still makes use of all those stats that he gets from it. And then anything that's good for reroll, such as Trade Sector, Preparation, Think Fast, that's going to be really powerful for this team. So one quick tip is that you need Quicksilver on Yasuo. If not, a lot of times he doesn't survive. And you just need him to cast. That's really all you do. So the only mandatory items on him is a healing item. In this picture, we have Handed Justice. Some people like Bloodthirster, but if I get Jeweled Gauntlet, I like Handed Justice because it gives more critical strike chance. But let's say you don't have Jeweled Gauntlet, then probably Bloodthirster is going to be a little bit better. But always get the Quicksilver. It is just so powerful to unlock his full potential. And that's really all you need to know there. Apart from that, play this like how you would for normal duelists. In terms of items, you want lockets on either Nyla or Fiora. And then just make sure you slow roll on level 6 because you want all the 3-stars for all your 2-cost units. So I have the priority here. Yasuo is the most important, followed by Fiora, Malphite equal to Lee Sin, and then Gangplank is the least important. After you hit Yasuo 3, you can decide if you want to slow roll for Fiora 3-star, Malphite 3-star, Lee Sin 3-star. So if you're close to them, keep rolling. If you're far away from them, for example, if you have 1 copy of Fiora, 2 copies of Malphite, no copies of Lee Sin, in those cases, just level up instead. Play more duelist units. You could throw in Twist of Fate, for example. And then finally, if you have so much gold, you could also reroll for Nyla 3-star, Vayne 3-star, because with the super buff, it gives them even more damage. So those are all things to consider here. We have other items for Yasuo that we can recommend, Edge of Night. It's a fake replacement for Quicksilver. Quicksilver is going to be a lot better. Titan's Resolve, very, very powerful on Yasuo. This is I wish he could hold 4 items, because Titan's Resolve is just tailor-made for this build. Giant Slayer, Rabadon's Guardbreaker, Blue Buff, any other damage items are going to work on him right there. But yeah, the core of the comp, just 6 duelists, only play with Winds of the Wanderer. That's pretty much all you need to know. If you want to know how to counter it, Time Machine to go back in time to when his targeting was bad. That is probably the only way to do it. So let's move on into the A tier. Oxforce Spellslinger, still solid, it's not anything that special. It's not anything bad. It's just in a very good spot right now in terms of balance. I'd say it's pretty balanced, Despite the big Oxforce change, the relative power is about the same. So props to Riot on that one, A lot of people say I don't give them credit where credit is due, but now is definitely one of those times because whenever you rework something, oftentimes the comp is either super good afterwards or super bad, but the overall power is relatively the same. So that's pretty cool. It's a pretty decent comp, not overly OP, not overly bad. It's just a regular 4-cost comp that you could kind of flex between different carries with. You could go into Star Guardians, more Spellslingers, or just play the Twist of Fate version with the Oxforce units. All versions are perfectly fine. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The picture you see here is just one version of the build. You could go for 6 Spellslinger. You could go for 4 Star Guardian. You could even go for the 6 Star Guardian with Nico carry that we saw earlier. That's kind of my favorite part about this comp is that you have a lot of different options at your disposal, which is kind of pretty cool. So There's really no requirements. I'd say the only like must have is like the static shiv on Twisted Fate, but if you're going for Nico carry, you could have like an Ionic Spark on your Echo, and that would be fine too. Just make sure you play around which carry you 2-star, because I see a lot of people, they're like forcing the Twisted Fate build because Twisted Fate is a little more popular right now, but then they 2-star their Nico before their Twisted Fate, and then they still itemize for their Twisted Fate. That's probably the biggest mistake I see when people play this comp, and in those games you have to be like, hey, I have a 2-star Nico. Even though Twisted Fate might be a little bit better, I should itemize my Nico instead because that's what I hit this game. It's like if you're playing the lottery or something like that and you win like a mini prize, let's say you just get $100, but you're like, oh no, I'm not happy with that. Let me just keep playing and try to like win the whole thing. Like, I don't know, like just play around with $100 instead, you know? But let's move on into the next build. We have the threat build. So threat's a little weird right now because again, I did mention that we have 2 builds that you can possibly try. And the first one is going to be the mech threat build. And that's just gonna be what you see here, except instead of the front line you see, you just replace it with a mech, and then you go for Bel'Veth, Asol carry, or you could just play pure threats, and you don't need threat level maximum with this. Both builds are perfectly fine. Oh, I actually put a link here, so you can actually just click that, and it'll hopefully go to it. It did not. Okay, now it did work. All right, that's perfect. So let's go back into the build. We were going over the threat comp. The only thing that I have questions on here is if you want to run the Last Whisper on the Bel'Veth, or you're like, hey, I got a Morgana, therefore I do not need a Last Whisper. So I guess you could get away with not using the Last Whisper on Bel'Veth and then put on like a survivability item such as like Edge of Night, or maybe put on like a Runon's Hurricane. That's also really good on Bel'Veth. But a lot of times my Morgana dies when Bel'Veth is still alive in the late game, so that's why I kind of like having the Last Whisper on him anyways, even though Morgana kind of does the same thing. That doesn't mean Morgana's useless. She still CCs people on the enemy team, but that's just one thing to note because I know some people had some questions on that earlier. But yeah, for this build, you want to just play like strongest board, and then you hopefully fast 8. This build isn't something that you'd kind of like go into at the start of the game. It's kind of something that you pivot into because you never like plan around playing threat units. You plan around playing like the Star Guardians, you plan around playing like the Mech Samira, but sometimes like life gives you threats and then therefore you have to play the threats. Let's move on into Vex Reroll. So this build, it was picking up a little bit of popularity last week, but I feel like this patch is going to be a bit better because they kind of nerfed a lot of the other stuff. No one's really playing this, and you get all your pikes back because everyone was stealing pike before. So I think that's why it's a little bit stronger now. Definitely go for the 6 Mascot version, so you need to have your Zac close to your Vex in order to get the buff for that. And then Malphite's generally going to be the main tank. So you want to slow roll for Vex at level 7, but you might need to stabilize at stage 3 too, as with any 3-cost reroll comp. But focus on Malphite as your main tank, Vex as your 3-star damage carry, and then that's really all you have to do. Play 6 Mascot, 4 until you get Nunu. So what you end up doing is playing supers in the early game during like stage 3 and 4, and then once you hit Nunu, replace them with the 6 Mascots, and then that's really all there is. So let's move on into the next build, which is going to be the Lasercorps comp. So Lasercorps, man, they have been on the decline right now, and that's because everything else just got like a little bit stronger, and then Lasercorps got nerfed like a couple patches ago, and you really need to rely on the +1 Lasercorps from Lasercorps Hearts or Lasercorps Soul, because the comp is just not the same without it. So this is one of those comps where if you get one of these augments early, you just like hard force it, but if you don't, like, it's a highly mediocre comp. So it's like S tier if you do get the Lasercorps thing, but then like very low A tier, maybe even like B tier if you don't. That's not to say like never play it, it's just like a lot weaker. Also, Hacker got nerfed a little bit, so the most popular version before was the Hacker version, but maybe people figure out different ways to play this. Maybe there's like a 5 Lasercorps 4 Brawler version that like could be used a lot more, and you just drop the Hackers for that. But pretty much like items on Warwick, Pike, Mordekaiser, Shen, like your whole team, it doesn't matter because all your damage comes from the Lasercorps units. That's kind of the way it's been, and that's kind of the way it's going to keep going. And I think that's kind of cool because it's like a unique comp in that sense. So even though items are still like important, you still have to go for like items that you want. We have them listed out down here in the item section. Like, don't stress too much about them if you have like the plus Lasercorps augments, because that's going to be where most of your power is coming from. You don't really need to worry about like losing health on purpose in order to get perfect items or like greeting your items. Just like slam your items to your heart's content and just go from there. As long as they're like semi-buildable, it's going to be fine. That's, I'd say, like my most important tip for that. But let's move on into Duelists. Duelists, I said, were going to be an underrated comp before, and I'm still standing by that. I know I only said it 20 minutes ago, but that's just how it's going to be, because hackers really destroyed Duelists because you pretty much leave your Duelist alone in the back line. So any hacker that jumps to the back, they just kill them, and then you have no more damage on your team. But since hackers are gone, that's why this comp is like kind of back. Lockets for sure are a necessity. And then if you are facing a lot of mech, make sure you have like a Last Whisper and like a Giant Slayer. If not, like do the builds that you see here. But I'd say the most important thing is having a Locket, having a good Duelist start at stage 2-1 is super important. I go over this in my Augment guide that I'm going to release tomorrow. So again, hopefully you all are sticking around for that. I think I'm going to do the Augment guide update like maybe once every 2 weeks. So meta snapshot every Friday, Augment guide once a patch. I feel like that's going to be a good balance. But the great thing about Duelists nowadays is that you could go either AD or AP carry. So if you have a lot of AD items, go for Vayne carry. If you have a lot of AP items, go for Twist of Fate. You could even pivot into this comp because you use a lot of rods. So let's say you like collect rods, and then you have Twist of Fate items, but then you're like, hey, I just got like a ton of Duelists, or I got like really good Duelist augments. You could just switch completely into Duelists, and it's generally going to be okay. With this comp, you really want to play for tempo, so just like slam all your items, similar to the Lasercorps comp, but like you slam it for different reasons. Lasercorps slam it just because like they don't get much power from the items, but Duelists slam items because they want to win in the early game. And this comp does fall off, so that's something you do have to keep in mind when you play this. Moving on to the next comp, we have Jax. Jax is really popular in China. It hasn't really caught on everywhere else for some reason, though. That doesn't mean it's bad, it's just like a pattern I noticed. The only thing you really need for this build is extra range for Jax, so that's either RFC or scope weapons. I guess you could use a Kale, like, righteous range augment as well, but that's stretching it a little bit, you know? Because then you have to run Kale. But you just want to reroll for 3-cost units. So again, same with all the other 3 costs, stabilize on stage 3-2, and then econ back up on level 7, and then slow roll for your 3-star units there. That's really all there is to it. Items, Gwynsu, Rageblade, Incredible, Titan's Resolve, Quicksilver Sash, Giant Slayer, all really good. And then you could secondary carry your Warwick, but I like focusing more on tank items on Riven. So if you do have spare items, I think Jax is first priority, then Riven, then Warwick. But I guess if you get an early Warwick 2-star, you could just go for him instead. But let's go for the next comp, which is Built Different. Only play this with a Built Different augment. This comp is pretty solid, but it did take a minor step down this patch, I think, because Mech players are stealing your Garens, Star Guardian players are stealing your Echoes, Anima squad players are stealing your Misfortunes, and then your Samira is getting taken by all the Mech players. So it is a little contested in terms of the units, but luckily you could play like threat units instead. I know threat units don't benefit from the trait, but they're still pretty solid to play because threat units never got benefits from any trait to begin with. But pretty much what you want to do is try to win streak in the early game. Doesn't always happen, but in the mid game it's pretty easy to. And then you want to go to level 8, roll down for 4-cost units, and then pretty much go from there. I guess one carry that might be underrated for Build Different is maybe Jhin, because not too many people are playing Jhin. So I guess that's like one option you have there, even though the other ones are a bit better. Like Samira, Misfortune, much better carries than Jhin in my opinion, but you know, you got to do what you got to do. We have the full guide here. I really recommend looking at that because we talk a lot about the early game units that you can play. So if you are like seeing this augment a lot and you want to learn how to play it more, like definitely check out this section on the website here. But let's move on into the next comp, which is Ashe Reroll. So the way to play Ashe, and I'm going to teach you how to play all 1-cost rerolls right now, is that you're looking for 3 1-costs right here: Blitz, Renekton, and Ashe. So a lot of people, they make the mistake of only slow rolling at level 5 for Ashe 3-star, or they do what's called like a hyper roll all the way down to 0 at stage 3-1, which is the last turn you're level 4. But what you actually need to do whenever you play 1-cost reroll is take the in-between approach. So do not level up in the early game. Everyone does that. But then on stage 3-1, roll down to 30 gold instead of 0 or not rolling at all. This gives you a lot of copies of Ashe while still preserving your economy so that you could slow roll after in case you don't hit. Obviously, if you're like one-off Ashe by the time you roll down to 30 gold, you could just all in right there. But in most cases, this is going to be the best method. So after you do that, econ back up to level 50 and then slow roll down to 50 at level 5 for the rest of the game until you hit Ashe 3, or you find a good time to all in and then level up after that, play other synergies. You want to play more Lasercorps, maybe play a Sure Shot. Maybe play just random threat units. I don't really care. You know, it's like you just really care about getting Ashe 3-star. And then apart from that, the only other requirement that you have is having Last Whisper on your Ashe. So Last Whisper, Runon's Deathblade. Deathblade's incredible in this build because Laser Focus gives you a lot of attack speed, and Deathblade gives a lot of attack damage. You always want to mix and match your itemizations, traits, and like augments, whatever you have, to give you all sorts of different stats because that's just the best way to scale in this game. Blitzcrank's going to be the main tank. You could use Renekton if you don't get Blitz 3-star and you have a Renekton 3-star. But yeah, this is pretty much going to be the team. You really only care about like these 3 units. The rest are just trait bots, and they could do whatever they want. You know, you don't really care about them. But yeah, hopefully you guys like learn how to play 1-cost reroll through this video, but maybe I should make a dedicated video on that later. Next up, we have Gnar Hacker. So Gnar Hacker got a big nerf because 3 hackers no longer give healing to the rider. So Gnar definitely took a big hit there. Luckily, Gadgetines are still broken. So if you get a Gadgetine emblem, it is S tier still. So you definitely can just force the comp if you get these in the beginning of the game. And yeah, nothing really has changed with this build. You still need a hacker to the right areas. You still want to play for 5 Gadgetine. And the reason why this comp is so good with those augments is because you get to 5 Gadgetine for free. And then Pyke's still a solid unit. They only nerfed the hacker trait. All the units themselves, they're all still the same. So it's like Pyke's still amazing. Gnar still deals a lot of damage. He just lost 10% lifesteal on hacker, which I get it. It sucks losing that, but it's not the end of the world. The only thing that the hacker nerf really affected was the Leblanc build, which we'll get into later. But yeah, this build plays the same exact way as it did last week, so I'm not going to delve too deeply into this because we already went over this in depth last week. So let's move on into Jhin Renegades. So Jhin, definitely in the back seat right now in terms of 4 costs. I'm going to leave it in the A tier for now because I think since it's underplayed, it's pretty easy to hit, especially as like a backup comp. So if you're going for Samira items, it's like they have the Last Whisper, i.e. Giant Slayer, all great Samira items. But if you just hit the Jhin early, you could just switch into it. No one's going to judge you, and that's going to be that. You could play 5 Renegade. There are other versions of this build that runs more tanks. You could even play like Mech with Jhin. I've seen that too because like Leona's a Renegade unit, and then you just need Garen plus Wukong, for example. You just take out Alistair and Fiddlesticks, or just take out some Renegades in that case, such as like Camille. Both versions work. However, I like this one a little more because the whole point of playing this build is that it's uncontested. So going for like these other units and non-mech units, it's a little easier to hit, even though the version might be like a tiny bit weaker. So obviously if you hit, you hit, but like, hey, if I win the lotto, like I'm not really going to brag about it because that's literally just luck. So if you just hit, like, yeah, play the mech. It's going to be slightly stronger. But in most cases, when you're going for this build, like, you're not playing it because it's strong. You're playing it because it's just what you got that game. And yeah, that's going to be it. So like, again, read the full descriptions if you want the full rundown of it. But Jinx Reroll, I'm very excited about this comp because it got buffed a lot. So in the Jinx comp, you play it the same exact way you play the other Anima squad build, except you reroll for Jinx 3. Unfortunately, there aren't too many units that you could also roll for. I guess Riven is really the only one, but like no one that's a 2 cost, right? I guess you could go for Vi 3. That's why she's kind of included here because she gives you both Brawler and Aegis with Echo. And you may notice we only have 6 Anima squad here. That's because like sometimes you get the Anima squad like crowns or emblems and stuff like that, but you could always just drop Nasus if you want to like fit in another unit. But you really just need Jinx's Get Excited augment. It is good now. It's not like super broken like Yasuo's augment, but it's still pretty good, which is why we have it in like the A tier right now. You pretty much build the same items on Jinx as you do on MF. And that's another great thing about this comp because like Jinx can use a lot of MF's items. She could also use a bunch of the attack speed items, which is pretty cool. And just the generic damage items such as like Giant Slayer, Guard Breaker. She pretty much uses everything. So she's really great there. But yeah, this is just another version of the build for Anima Squad that we wanted to showcase. And yeah, we had it in the C tier or like low B tier for a while. Finally rose up because it got huge buffs. Onto the B tier, we'll just name the comps. We're not going to go over how to do them because like you really shouldn't be playing these that much, only in like a dire situation. But like there's a heart reroll comp with like Lee Sin, Sona. Because Cleansing Safeguard got nerfed, it's like kind of in the dumpster right now. It got buffed a little bit in the recent patch if you guys checked out the patch notes video, but not powerful enough yet. Lucian reroll definitely got huge nerfs, so not like an auto win like it was before. And then Draven reroll, yeah, I wouldn't recommend playing this, but you know what? It's a free country. If you really want to play Draven reroll, go ahead. But yeah, it's definitely a lot weaker now, especially with the hacker nerfs. It got like nerfed for no reason, right? Because it wasn't the issue. All the other comps were an issue. But if you get like a ton of Dravens, I guess go for the build. And then finally, we have in the C tier, Leblanc Hacker. Do not play this comp, even though it was S tier. Let me change the description right now. Here we go. I guess if you have a LeBlanc 2-star on stage 2-1, like, yeah, sure, go play this comp still. But unless that's happening, I would just avoid this. Maybe it's not like that bad, but it's pretty bad right now. So now let's move into the items. Right now, I think Bow Start's going to be the best because you could play for the mech stuff. You could play for Bel'Veth, Samira, Kai'Sa. Like, yeah, Kai'Sa's another good build. Warwick or Jhin, they're all pretty solid. Tears, good for Anima because you want the Shojin. It's good on Kai'Sa because she likes a Static Shiv. Static Shiv also works on Spellslinger. And then Vex really likes the blue buff. So those are things to consider there. And then lastly, defensive items really good right now because Mech's good. That's why Cloak is so high. Normally Cloak's like the worst item, pretty much in like the history of TFT. But in mech metas, Negatron Cloak is very, very, very powerful because it builds all the good defensive items for Garen. And that's just kind of what you do there. We have some item recommendations down here. Maybe I should make this into like an early game slam guide. Yeah, maybe I'll do that in the future. But don't forget about the augment guide that's coming out tomorrow. So again, like subscribe for that to get notifications on it. But we do have it on the website. It's bunnymuffins.lol/augments. This is for like stage 2-1. So if you're like playing the game, you're like, you don't know what to go for in the when the augments pop up and you have like 50 seconds, I believe, to do that turn. Just go ahead, open up the website, just see what they're at and like what I think and what situations I think you should take each augment in, because I do have some good notes here. So if you're like, oh, like I took Lasercorps Heart or something like that and it didn't go that well. So you might be wondering like, why is that the case? Because I checked the data and Lasercorps Heart is so good. Well, you should only play Lasercorps if you have at least 3 copies of Lasercorps units. And when I say copies, I don't mean like having 3 Lasercorps, I mean having like 3 copies of the unit. So it could be like 2 Renekton's and 1 Ashe, for example. And I mark that down for other stuff such as like Anima Squad, 4+, and then like, yeah, it'll pretty much go over all that stuff. But like if you want to like have a reference guide, it is going to be on the website, bunnymuffins.lol/augments. However, that's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.